folks. This is James French.
This is Ted Diamond.
And you're listening to The Awareness Connection, a podcast where we talk about health and human development, mind-body awareness. And this week, we're going to be discussing vertebrate design. How does that relate to mind-body awareness? How does it relate to making practical use of the body? How does it relate to movement? How does it relate to health? It really is. It's an important thing to discuss, and we're following up on the past few episodes where we've been speaking about the subject of developmental movement. All right, so very important. I can't wait to have this discussion. It's something that I really liked about your writing, Ted, when you showed me this.
Yeah, it's a fascinating subject. You know, we look at it when we look at children and we watch how they progress toward being upright. It's amazing how much we take it for granted that they should become upright. And we think of it as a learning process. We don't look at the uprightness itself as an amazing architectural, endpoint. We know a lot about this sort of the morphology of upright design. But if we have a back problem, we try to treat the back problem. We don't see it as a function of upright design, but it's entirely a function of upright design. So in a sense, we have knowledge about it, but we don't have very much practical knowledge.
Yeah, so we'll be discussing, I said vertebrate design, but really more specifically, upright design. And this is something that we spoke a lot of the past maybe 2 episodes, about how human upright design really is more than simply bipedalism. It is bipedalism, but it's a specific kind of bipedalism, and it's maybe unique in the animal kingdom. I mean, human upright design is unique in the animal kingdom.
Yeah, I remember James, we spoke about this in terms of the brain and how it evolved, and this is something Darwin believed that uprightness preceded the enlargement of the brain. And he was right. It turned out one of many predictions and speculations he made that turned out to be accurate. It's clear now that the predecessors of humans went upright when the brain was still small, looked like a chimpanzee or something. And it was being upright that led to the explosion in the size of the brain. And Darwin, again, was pretty accurate when he said that this was because being upright meant that the arms were entirely free for tool making, for gathering. I mean, think about the difference between a chimpanzee that can sort of hold things, but is sort of hobbling along, or an early upright human that can gather things as part, let's say, fruit from a tree, and is able to do that as an activity that begins to help organize how they're living and planning, and tool making is another huge advance.
Yeah.
But all those things presuppose uprightness and the importance of being upright. They don't explain uprightness. And when we look for explanations, we say, well, it just meant that, in order for a chimp, the common ancestor of chimpanzees and humans, in order for one of them to split off and become upright, the pelvis had to change in size, or the legs had to get longer, et cetera. But those modifications don't explain how remarkable the design is and how unique.
Yeah.
So that's interesting to look at, and that's what we're going to talk about a little bit.
Yeah. And it makes me think that, they don't really even explain that it is a design either. Not in the, not in the sense that there's a creator who, has sort of like an architectural blueprint. We don't mean design in that way. It means sort of like if you went to, like a race car manufacturer, the people who work on that car, they know how the engine is supposed to work. They know how the suspension and the chassis are supposed to function. Like there's design specs. not an intelligent designer, but like a there's force principles, there's leverage principles, there's a physics of that machine, and it's similar here. Like what is upright posture? What is human upright design? We're going to use that word. And why is it not just like the shape of the pelvis? It seems like there's just a lot more to it when you look under the hood, so to speak.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think one of the primary pieces of that that's overlooked is how it's possible for a bony structure supported by nothing but connective tissues and muscles to lengthen upright against gravity. I mean, that's the primary problem of being upright, is maintaining force against gravity, upward force against gravity, because of course, if you can't do that, you can't be upright. And it's always answered in terms of what muscles do to pull on bones. But if muscles just pulled on bones, the whole thing would pull itself down. And in fact, nature doesn't do it that way. Nature creates upright support, just like it creates support in a four-footed animal, with a cooperative design between connective muscle tissue and bone, such that the muscle pulls on bones, but the muscle is suspended between bones. And in the upright version of that, that requires a counterbalance of the head against the muscles of the neck and back, such that these muscles of the neck and back are able to maintain the support of the head and the trunk, but at the same time are lengthened between the head and the pelvis. That's an amazing design feature, but overlooked because it's a dynamic quality that that can be interfered with. And when it's not interfered with, the back will work quite nicely. If it's interfered with, the back becomes distressed. So there's a major piece of that design. Yeah.
Yeah. So this goes toward like efficiency, right? So this is like if you're going to build a bridge, for instance, you can stack stones and stack boards on top of them. This is probably a pretty good design, but over a certain size, it's just going to require so much material, and it's probably going to be pretty rickety, and it's not going to stand up to certain weather and all that.
Yeah.
What would be the most efficient way of like supporting weight with the least amount of inputs possible? And this is sort of like a principle in nature. Like nature's super parsimonious with weight specifications, with energy inputs. There's not infinite food for animals to be eating. How does nature put together like this moving creature on land that can stand up like against gravity with a minimum of effort? How does it do that? And then it goes toward like, how do you do it standing fully upright? And it doesn't seem to
And
make sense, like just like you said before, if it were just about muscles just literally contracting and yanking on bones, it would seem like that structure, given that it's not like a one-piece column, it's composed of hundreds of bones, it seemed like that structure would instantly collapse. But also, if it were just about contracting muscles, it would be a lot of effort and energy. It has to be something different than this.
Yeah, and it would be fixed. And the whole point of being of any animal structure is that it has to be it has to be capable of movement and mobility. It makes me think of the old is it the Rolfing, the bodywork the old image I believe that they used was sort of like pieces of I don't know if it was bone or segments of the body that were shown as stacked vertically.
Yeah.
Well, the body
I've
is
seen
not
that
just simply a
diagram.
bunch of things stacked and then muscles keep it from falling over.
Right, right, right.
Just not how it
If you
works.
like get the stacking just right, then okay, like that's what you want to keep. And muscles are like minimum contraction here, minimum contraction there to correct the situation.
Yeah.
You know, and
Yeah, that's the plumb. Yeah, and by the way, that's the plumb line theory. If everything's quite
plumb line.
close to a plumb line, then there's less effort to keep it up. But it
Yeah.
begs the question of how it's maintained in a plumb line, and what does that mean when you say less effort? It's still having to hold, just not as much. I mean,
Mm,
yeah,
yeah. Yeah. And how, like, why would human upright posture, if it would be sort of like this stacking of columns on top of each other, why would it be so different than its evolutionary predecessors? Like, if we
yeah,
really agree with the view that we're descended from four-footed animals who are fully capable of like a wide range of movements, but we're not literally stacked,
right,
um, why would human upright posture be so different? I mean, it
yeah.
isn't just a metamorphosis; it would be a change in kind. You
Yeah,
know?
totally. Yeah. Yeah, which we see with the child clambering. It's not like when they get upright, all of a sudden everything decides to stack vertically, and nature said, "Oh, this is a great arrangement." It was
Mhm.
already a dynamic arrangement of muscles and bones and connective tissue that was working at every stage.
Mhm.
Otherwise, it could never have arrived there. And the only way you're going to have that is when you have a dynamic architecture in which muscles and connective tissue are suspended between bones, which oppose the pull of the muscles. So the whole thing
Mhm.
is dynamically kind of suspended, like a tensegrity structure.
Mhm. So this is a principle then. This like this arrangement where um, bones and muscle don't simply have the relationship where one is just pulling on the other in one direction, where it's actually uh, more of a unified structure where there's no clear delineation between connective tissue and bones. They're these are two things only sort of in theory, where really it's one structure. It's one sort of like architectural structure
Yeah, that's
that's
the tensile part of that. Yeah, yeah.
mm,
All of
so,
that makes up the tensile part of the tensegrity structure.
mm.
Yeah.
So this
And
is a principle that's going back quite far in like the evolutionary development of upright posture.
yeah.
So like, we're talking about, we mentioned at very first vertebrate evolution. This is sort of a principle that's been worked on and
Mm.
metamorphosed since kind of the ocean,
Yeah,
you know,
since the first vertebrates. Yeah.
since the first vertebrates.
Yeah. Yeah, so that relation of the head and the trunk, you'd have to say that's the primary relationship of the parts because the shoulders are secondary. You first got to get the whole thing working. That's the head trunk relationship. That's what Alexander called the primary control because
Hmm.
that was the key elements those are the key organizing components that are central to the support of the whole thing in a field of gravity. And
Hmm.
then you have secondary systems like the shoulder girdle, which are part of that structure, but secondary in the sense that you could remove, the whole shoulder and you'd still have the upright structure, but you can't have the upright structure if you remove part of that. So the
Hmm.
key parts. So the the shoulder girdle is a secondary structure, but it's part of it because if the shoulder girdle is contributing, interfering in some way, as it often does with the upright support, and everything is narrowed and the shoulders are, let's say, held and heavy, then it interferes with the whole. So
Hmm.
the shoulders are interdependent with the upright structure,
Hmm.
but they also have a beautiful architectural design. So the
Yeah.
shoulders are meant to work with expansion. That's that's sort of the key to how the shoulder works. What we call widening. They're supposed
Hmm.
to, naturally remain widened across the chest, widened across the back, and
Hmm.
when they do, they're suspended kind of above the rib cage in such a way that we could use the arm and hand in fine motor tasks in an effortless way. And again, there's a design that we interfere with. But when we have a shoulder problem, we say, well, there's a problem with inflammation or with a particular problem with the rotator cuff. And we don't look at the whole design. But most shoulder problems come from an interference with that design.
Mm. This is, that's interesting, Ted. And it makes me think, the the sort of like evolutionary progression of four-footed to upright. It wasn't neat, wasn't pretty, in like a lot of instances. But there's organisms that, from the point of view of fully upright, we can see as transitional organisms. They aren't transitional organisms to themselves. They're living, full lives, and their like pelvises are designed differently. Their foramen magnum is arranged differently in their skull and all that stuff. But from the point of view of like a Homo sapiens, like our fully upright form, we would say that this is sort of like a transition organism. And it isn't just the foramen magnum, but it's things like the shoulder function. And so how does the shoulder of a cat, for instance, which would be a representative of a much earlier form from the point of view of human, differ from the shoulder girdle of say an ape, like an earlier primate, earlier, so to speak, and then a human? And it makes me think that, that's a question that I want to put to you. And then, like, what does a shoulder girdle in, I guess you can call us like an obligate upright form, we're obligate nose breathers or obligate aerobic creatures, but we're an obligate upright form. We can do a whole bunch of other things. We can get on 4 foot, but that's the sort of what we are. How does the shoulder girdle differ?
Yeah. In a cat, the shoulder girdle is primarily a structure for support on 4 legs. So there are other functions to the forelimbs of a cat, because they can, grasp, claw, paw at things as part of hunting, etc. But primarily, the shoulders are part of the support on four limbs. And then in a primate, there's a whole new bunch of functions that emerge, because many of the primates are hanging by the arm, are starting to use the hand. I mean, look at a chimpanzee sitting and actually has tool use. A chimpanzee can actually, strip down a little weed and, pull termites out of a mound. And so they're beginning to use the hand as a tool to use a tool. But they don't have completely free use of the forelimbs, which are still used for walking. They walk very awkwardly on 2 feet. So they're not fully upright. So they haven't sort of emancipated the upper limb entirely for tool use. But humans going upright, being balanced on 2 feet or on their sit bones, as we do when we're sitting, now the arm becomes, the whole new bunch of functions emerge, where the hand becomes a very finely tuned tool for tool use. And so, you have this transformation. And yet in each case, the shoulder has a beautiful design, and we overlook how well it works for what it does. I mean, it just goes back to what you said, that, we have an idea of how we've evolved to the upright, but we don't know a lot about what the upright posture actually is as a dynamic, movable system, and how we interfere with it.
Yeah. And like the shoulder girdle of a cat, for instance, you said it's primarily about support on 4 feet. It does running around. It could bat around a ball of yarn and all that stuff, but it's primarily about like, I don't know what the right word would be, but just continuous support against gravity when it's when it's walking.
Postural
You know?
support. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
postural support, and
Yeah.
it would be the same thing in a primate. In a non-human primate, it's the same.
Yeah.
It's intimately involved in postural support, although the arms are being used differently, but it's still primarily about postural support. And it's
Yeah.
interesting to think in a human being, and this is a thing that we don't think about. It's still intimately involved in postural support. The shoulder girdle,
Mm.
which doesn't seem to have much to do with postural support because we're not walking on all fours, we're not walking on 2.5 like a gorilla, but it's still the design, the functional specifications of the shoulder. If they're not working well, the whole postural system is in distress. It means that the whole postural system is not quite working.
Yeah, it makes me think, James, how I remember someone asked once in one of our online classes, they were skeptical. They said, well, the arms are not part of the postural system because they're not supporting us anymore, but they
Mm,
are part of it. I mean, all you have to do if you're standing is lean. You don't have to think twice about it, and you're
hmm
supporting weight on the elbow,
Yeah.
always available to support us all the time. And we do in fact support on the arm and hand, or like that. That's posture.
hmm
Go up to a 2-year-old that's standing, of course, low to the ground. You bend down to pick up a 2-year-old, just pick them up by the elbow, and you just literally can lift them by the elbow, because
hmm
the arm is so integrated and supported into the trunk
hmm
that, no different than the feet, you could just pick them up from the elbow and they'll come right up in your hands, because
mm
their forelimbs, their upper limb is part of their postural system.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you're right. If the shoulders, system is heavy, then we've collapsed the postural support, and it will
hmm
interfere with the whole system.
hmm
And conversely, if we free the shoulder, it will help restore the whole system,
mm
because it's part of the whole system.
Yeah. Yeah. Because the nature of the human upright postural system is that it's a single unified thing. And
Yeah,
like
single
it,
integrated whole, the whole thing. Yeah.
yeah, and the way that a postural system works in a human, just like you said, it's this expansive interplay between softer tissues and rigid tissues that maintains itself in this um, sort of automatic way when it's working well. When it's sort of designed to be continuously maintaining itself, and the shoulders aren't just a little part of it. They're not just like arm holders or like
Mm.
decorations or something like this. It's
Yeah.
actually, it's like the top part of the kite. Like
Yeah.
a kite that you fly in the air. There's no part of the kite that's not intimately related to catching air and holding the form of the kite.
Yeah. Right.
And if the
That's
top
right.
mast of the kite, the top horizontal part of the kite is broken, then the kite's not going to fly,
Yeah.
and you have
Right.
to
Right.
restore it.
Yeah. That's right. It's part of a whole. Yeah, which comes around to the idea so here we have an animal that's evolving. The different animals that have had to go through transformations leading to the primates and then the fully upright human primate. We could look at how that evolves in terms of modifications from earlier forms to later ones. But at each stage in the process, you have um, a complete integrated whole.
Mm,
Some of the designs were not very effective and didn't survive.
hmm
Some of them kept going. Some of them were, like you said, were transitional, like the amphibian stage from fish to reptile. Very transit. So we don't have many examples of that transitional phase, because it was, quite quick, and didn't. You don't have these long lasting. What are there? Only like 3 extant forms of amphibian,
mm,
but every stage is complete and can only be understood as a complete whole. So we could look at how it's pushed from behind, or how earlier components lead up to the present. And
hmm
we could also look at how it every stage as a whole, and we can only understand the whole by seeing how the whole thing works as a whole. And we tend to overlook that one and favor the causal linear explanation. So we say,
Mm.
yeah, no, I know that, I know chimpanzees, the shoulders are more forward, like that. And in humans, you get a broadening of the chest. That's part of being upright, is that the chest
Mm.
broadened or widened. So you don't have this big barrel shaped chest and shoulders coming forward. You have the parts of the body are more organized around a plumb line to give more efficiency.
Mm-hmm.
But that explains how the shoulders got that way. But to understand the shoulders fully, we also have to understand how they function as a complete whole. And as a whole,
Yeah.
they're part of the kite. They're part of the whole kite in the way it flies or supports itself.
Mm-hmm.
They also work with a minimum of effort. And if you're using too much effort, you're not using them the way they're designed.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a key part of anatomical design, is to see that it's a complete, holistic, functioning whole. And then
Mm-hmm.
people say, yeah, but that's too intentional. It's not intentional. That's just how it is. I mean,
Yeah.
nature produces the most miraculous designs.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
don't need to attribute intention or purpose. It has its own inherent meaning, the way it functions as a shoulder girdle.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is one of the the difficulties with this particular subject, looking at it with the present scientific outlook, the present sort of dominant scientific outlook. Like, this functional design seems like it has to be studied from a personal perspective in order to really understand it, and to gain the perspective that you need to look at it from a third person perspective. It seems like the way that this design functions, it has to be like a studied from the level of sentient experience first. you know
Well, I mean, that's true of education in general. So yeah, that's that. So now we're talking, if it's not working well, isn't it a distinctly human attribute that we should look at it not working well and want to figure out why it works the way it works or what's wrong with it? So yeah, now we're in that very weird position of looking at ourselves and how we've evolved.
hmm
We typically look and say, yeah, well, we're not designed very well. That's your
yeah, sort of
cynical. That's the
throwing up the
sentient.
hands.
Yeah, that's the cynical view of the sentient experience. That yeah, well, yeah, well, we're kind of messed up, unlike the
hmm
other animals. So here we have this miraculous sentient function, and what do? We look at one of our functions not working well, and all we could say is, we're kind of a wreck.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, I mean, that's not exactly doing justice to the shoulder girdle or to our sentient experience.
Yeah, or like natural evolution. Like what is evolution producing? Does it just produce new jumbles? Does it just does it just produce new sort of wackadoodle things that like don't work well? Or is it like producing, maybe not every time, but it seems to be producing very efficient, you know, gravitational engines, kind of. It seems to be producing these sort of amazing, miraculous things. And it just so happens that, like, like where we're at looking at the human design, it comes from the perspective of, our knees are hurting and our back is hurting, and so therefore it can't be a good design. The evidence for evolution producing just jumbles is the fact that our back hurts. It doesn't seem to be a really good, like, logical,
Right.
it doesn't really seem to be like a very penetrating view of the situation.
No,
you know
no, it's not. Yeah, walking, by the way, just to cover that another feature of our anatomical design is being upright. We're capable of a kind of a locomotion on 2 feet that's also unique.
Mm.
So chimpanzees can kind of hobble along, kind of bow-legged. but they're not very good two-footed walkers. There are other animals that, walk quite efficiently on 2 feet, and a lot of birds are bipedal, but we're the only biped that is fully upright with all the other major body segments like pelvis and, rib cage and head vertically stacked. And in that vertical posture, the legs are swinging under, the body is no longer moving this way, like in a 4-footed animal, the head and the trunk. It's this way. The legs are
Mm-hmm.
underneath, and the body is not moving that way, it's moving this way,
Mm-hmm.
just inclining with the legs swinging underneath. People have described that as being ungainly and weird, and they say, well, you know, upright walking in human beings is some weird arrangement. A weird arrangement has made it possible for humans to spread over the whole planet.
Yeah.
Makes it possible for us to go back into the water, walk on deserts, walk in forests, climb mountains,
Mm-hmm.
build things. I mean, it's the most miraculous form of locomotion you could possibly imagine.
Yeah.
And what do? We look at it cynically and say how stupid it is.
Yeah.
And it's not. It's an incredibly efficient form of locomotion that makes it possible to gather food, to make tools, to create homes, to make cities, to
Mm-hmm.
sit and read books, to write with a pen. I mean, it is, in fact, the most versatile locomotion support device in the known universe.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
And it
the
works
thing,
incredibly beautifully. I mean, I'm 69, I'm still walking on 2 feet.
it's, I mean, that's amazing. The thing that's fashionable to mention lately is, what made humans able to hunt these huge animals, antelopes, gazelles, things that can run 65 miles an hour, things that could crush us like a bug, like an elephant. What humans are able to do that's unique among any animal is to do exhaustion hunting, where you just walk after the animal until it drops dead of exhaustion. Just walk after it for 2 days. The animal's going to zip along, and it's going to get tired because it's only designed for short bursts. It's going to zip along again, get tired, and then finally it's going to be just collapsed, its tongue hanging out, and you just stab the thing. So like that means that humans have an extraordinary efficiency of movement.
Yeah.
They can, it isn't designed for power, it's designed for work, meaning, powers work over time. So like we can do an enormous amount of work just spread out over a long time.
Yeah. And if we want, we could also run a mile in 5 minutes, which is amazing.
Mm-hmm.
So walking, it has its liabilities. There's no doubt about that. And part of it is upright posture and the lumbar curve and the susceptibility of the lower back, or the hips to having problems.
Mm-hmm.
But we can also learn to use it. And in fact, I believe as humans, part of our challenge is that we need to learn to use these systems at a more conscious level.
Yeah.
And when we do, we can use the system more efficiently and maintain it more efficiently as we get older.
Mm-hmm.
So that instead of looking at it in terms of the deficiencies which we treat, which I think is useful but limited,
Mm-hmm.
we can learn to master the use of it and identify how the elements of walking that are part of the design, so we can maintain it as long as possible.
Yeah. 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 It's an amazing thing. Like learning how to work with this design. When you're able to make beneficial changes, like when you're able to get the, say the shoulders widening, and this is a personal practice thing, but like when you're able to get the shoulders widening, the head coming out of it, et cetera, all of those things that we talk about, you're standing there very quietly with no felt sense of effort at all. And you realize it isn't just a no felt sense of effort, but your whole body is like spring loaded. It's like it's like poised for movement, and movement at joints is pleasurable. And you realize I was born with this. I was given, this is sort of like an evolutionary, this is like a natural inheritance. I had nothing to do with this. and it's this sort of miracle. And you realize that you're not, true understanding of this upright system isn't it, it's something different than practicing some kind of a method. It's something different than standing tall. It's like restoring an inheritance. It's like restoring a birthright almost. Like, wow, you realize like this is an unbelievable and in some ways perfect machine.
Yeah. Amazing machine. And yeah, you're restoring it because that quality of effortlessness is
Mm-hmm.
an inherent principle underlying how it's meant to work. I mean, if you
Yeah.
experience standing again as effortless, the way you're
Yeah.
describing, then you've restored the upright and walking system as it's meant to work.
Yeah.
You haven't
Yeah.
just lowered tension or reduced effort or reduced tension in specific muscles that are overworking. You've restored the actual functional principle of walking as it's meant to function in walking.
Yeah. 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 And it's not something that you've like gotten good at, like it isn't like learning a song, or it isn't like learning how to swing a bat. It's like you're just restoring natural function, which is the principle of vertebrate movement. It's not just
Yeah,
human movement. It's just
exactly.
like, oh yeah,
Right.
you see a cat and they're standing there effortless. They're not distressed when they're standing there. They're not shifting around fidgeting because their back hurts.
Yeah,
They're
yeah,
just walking along. And we like admire other animals for this, but somehow doesn't translate to our own actions.
yeah.
And
We don't realize that's sort of the key to our own. Yeah,
that's the
and
key to our
you're
own.
not getting good at standing because you can't make your body stand better. That works on its own, but you can get better at learning how that works and being able to use your awareness to bring that about. So that's
There
a
you
kind of
go.
a competency.
There you go.
So that falls within the field not of therapy but education.
There you go. There you go. We're in the both like, unenviable position as people of having to learn about something natural that a cat didn't have to learn about. A fish doesn't have to learn about it. It just enjoys swimming 35 miles an hour in the ocean, but it's an unenviable position, but it really, you think about it, it's a sort of gift
Yeah,
also. It's the inheritance of a conscious mind also, maybe even more
yeah,
important.
yeah, exactly. And it's actually the gift of recognizing, learning how to use that system at a more conscious level as being its own, having its own value.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
When you mention all this, James, it makes me wonder if there's a follow up to this. I'm just thinking about that.
Yeah.
The follow up being conscious control, but I'm not sure.
Well, it'd be interesting to talk about some practical things too, I think. Like, we talk about natural design, and this is really what we're working with. This is what we're studying from an outsider, like from a scientific perspective, we want to understand it. But
Yeah,
really from a sentient perspective, this is the educational perspective that we want to be talking
yeah.
about. So how do you get the shoulders widening again if they've been interfered
Okay.
with? Like, how do
Yeah.
you get the back? Like, what does it mean to say that? I don't think we've talked about that yet in this
Hmm.
podcast.
Okay. That's a
What does
really
that
good
mean?
follow up. Yeah,
Yeah.
no, that's a good follow up. I jotted that down.
Okay.
We can make that our next topic. Absolutely.
Cool. Yeah. So tune in. I mean, this is, this work that we do, getting our physical conditions sorted out is not just, I don't know, it isn't a method. It isn't some therapeutic thing. It's actually like we're becoming more conscious.
A skill. Yeah. A
It's a
skill
skill.
or set of skills. Absolutely.
Yeah. It's an enviable thing. It's a real cool thing, and I want more people to know about it.
It's a little bit that topic, which we'll talk about.
Sensory
I'm
motor
showing like a
awareness.
proof of the book, but
Yeah,
sensory
Ted's,
motor
for
awareness.
people who don't see it, Ted's showing up a copy of his curriculum.
Yeah,
He's
we should talk
called
about.
it sensory motor awareness, and it's a whole education in our own inheritance and our own ability to transform our minds and our consciousness. So
Yeah,
yeah.
I like that as a topic. Yeah.
All right. Well, so tune in. We'll be releasing that, and we'll be following up with that topic. So thanks for listening, Ted. Thank you for the conversation.
Thank you. Thanks for
All right.
joining, everyone.
Okay. Signing off. Bye.